One interesting idea that I found in Super Smash Bros. Was the idea of Echo Fighters. Characters that are pretty similar, but have a few differences here and there from their counterparts. Although, they stopped after 7, and I highly doubt we'll get any more anytime soon. It does bring up an interesting question though. What if everyone had an Echo Fighter in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate? Of course, I highly doubt it would actually happen, but it's fun to think about nevertheless. Whether they be the exact same with a slightly different model, or show off an entirely new idea with an existing concept. I've tried looking for other options that aren't too common, as well as other obvious picks to keep things fresh. A couple ground rules for these characters. 1. They must have a similar body shape, fighting style, and feel as their counterparts. This keeps things close to the Ecrophile fear. 2. I won't be allowing existing costumes or color swaps, so characters like Elf, the Blood Falcon, or the Koopalings won't be picked. 3. I won't have any characters who already have Echo Fighters, or characters with semi-echoes. These include characters like Dr. Mario, Pichu, and Isabelle. Although I will allow pseudo-clones, so characters like Ness, Ganondorf, Lucas, and Wolf. I feel they are differentiated enough from their counterparts. And finally, while I want characters to fight like their counterparts, I will be looking for slight differences, and certain characters may seem more like semi-clones depending on their moveset. But anyways, I'm rambling on. Let's begin!
Choose your character!
So, let's start off with Donkey Kong. I wanted to come up with something a little more original than Funky Kong, which is a very common pick, but after Tropical Freeze's Funky build, frankly I don't think there's really any better choice for the role. Yoshi was a bit easier. There are already tons of different kinds of Yoshis, plus there's Boshi, a somewhat evil alternative, but in the end I went with Birdo, who shoots eggs rather than slay them. The biggest challenge with Kirby's Echo Fighter was somebody who could pull off similar things. I was going to go with Yellow Doppelganger Kibi, but despite how fun Kibi is to say, he's an existing color alt. So I went with my second pick, Shadow Kirby from Amazing Mirror. Ness was an interesting case. At first I wasn't going to include him, but there's barely enough to separate him from Lucas. As for an Echo Fighter, Inten's a popular choice, but I decided to go with the person who actually taught him most of his PSI arsenal, Paula. Luigi? He was easy. He already has a copy of himself after all. Gooigi, give him some slimy attacks and a weakness to water, and we're good to go. Like Luigi, Captain Falcon has an obvious pick. At first I went with this clone Blood Falcon, but given my own rule of not using costumes, the other racers like Jodie Summers could work too. Well, most of Falcon's arsenal was made for Super Smash Bros., you know. Jigglypuff has a couple of options. At first I was thinking of Lulu because they both roll around, but lacking the ability to fly or sing made it a problem. So instead I went with, I think, a better option, Wigglytuff. It's evolution, and it needs the heavyweight status. So that's all the N64 Fighters out of the way. Let's move on to the melee characters.
Choose your character!
In the Mario series, Bowser really didn't have too many heavy hitters that aren't just some darker version of him, but Bowser's Inside Story did present us with Midbus. He seems like a good fit, given moves based on his base form in his Ice form fights, and there's a good fit. Ice climbers are tricky, but I've seen several ideas for other Nintendo franchises that step in. Timmy and Tommy, La 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 and Lolodo, and the Baby Bros, which I think works best in my opinion, with the contrast of the ice and fire attacks. Since she now uses techniques from the Sheikah clan, I figured the most sense was to use their main rivals, the Yiga clan, with some of their own technology and weapons. Zelda, given her Breath of the Wild look, it made it obvious for a Hilda comparison, and it just makes too much sense to bring in her staff and Final Smash using the new Yuga Ganon to set herself apart. Like Bowser, there isn't too many heavy hitters in the Zelda franchise, much less ones like Ganondorf. All the ones I could think of are Demise, the original incarnation of Ganon, which could possibly be set apart with the Lightning and the imprisoned one Final Smash. YouTube has a couple suggestions for fighters, and Gaigu is a decent choice for an Echo Fighter, but I've gone with an unconventional for Roach with Gardevoir. While not quick and floaty, they can learn pretty much any move Mewtwo can in Smash Bros, although I would replace Shadow Ball with Moon Blast and have Mega Gardevoir use Side Beam for a final smash. Okay, hear me out. On paper, or cardboard, This seems like a bizarre case to say the least, but they're both from Nintendo experiments that have a lot of built-in games. I feel like the Labo figure, specifically this little figure, could fulfill the role for a Game & Watch Echo Fighter as an improvised fighter. So that's all the melee fighters out of the way. Now let's move on to Brawl. Probably the hardest to come up with Echo Fighters for.
Choose your character!
Going on from one of the hardest characters to come with a moveset for, we have a no-brainer with Galactica Knight, but if you want to count Meta Knight's paint color palette, Morpho Knight can work just as well. The Metroid series already doesn't have many possible candidates outside the already existing ones for Echo Fighters, but I did find one in Prime 3 with Gandradia, who is a shapeshifter, but also uses flips and blasters in the middle of battle. Not gonna lie, Wario's Echo Fighter kind of inspired this whole video for me. There isn't a lot of good choices for him, much less ones in WarioWare, which this Wario is mostly based on. I think I may have found one though with 9 volts, another short stack from the very start of WarioWare, a lot lighter and a little more radical. Not gonna lie, I actually haven't played any of the Metal Gear Solid games before, so it's kinda hard and frankly a little confusing to pick one character, primarily since a lot of characters are clones or impersonating other characters, so what better to go with than the true original, Big Boss, to step in as the Echo. For Ike, it's another case of looking for different outcomes. In this case, I looked at options like Dimitri or Hector, but Ike's own rival, the Black Knight, is probably his best choice, albeit with a tad bit more differences. The Pokemon Trainer does have the opportunity for other trainers from other generations, although I feel like no other generation can really match the same moveset as the first, given the different kinds of Pokemon. But I went with a different character who's been with Red and Green since the very start, Blue, with his team of Bulbasaur, Charmeleon, and Blastoise, specifically counter the Pokemon Trainer. Brawl Fan 1 did an amazing video on the subject, check him out! Diddy Kong has a pretty obvious pick, mainly since other Kongs are much larger than he is. Diddy Kong is kind of a no-brainer, and is kind of the main vocal point in Echo Fighter talk. Although I thought of the idea of Lanky Kong from Donkey Kong 64 too. Either or works for me. For Lucas, the Masked Man is brought up from time to time, but with Ness using Paula's moves, it only makes sense for Lucas's Echo would be Kubatora, who overall much prefers using PSI over her fists or weapons. Now for Sonic, I tried looking for other characters for Echo Fighters, but they're way different in shape and body abilities where I can't really put them as Echo Fighters. I was gonna go with Metal Sonic, but given his flight, Black Shield, Maximum Overdrive, and so much more, it didn't really work out. So Xiao's the best bet, albeit it's more of a semi-Echo Fighter more than a fully fleshed one. King Dedede does have a couple personas he can take on, like the Masked Deity or the Dark Deity, but I see them more as alternatives than anything else, and frankly I think Classic Enemies Bonkers is already a great pick. Olimar does have an old costume in the form of Alf, and in Smash 4 he was going to be exactly that with Rock Pikmin, but given my own rules, I decided against it. A more direct copy of Olimar would be Louie, who wouldn't need to change much. But if you want to add something a little bit different, Charlie and Brittany as a team works well. Either or is good. Lucario has several ideas for him, including Zoroark, Lion Croc, and Obstagoon. They're all decent picks, but in the end I went with Zeraora, another proud fighter, but sadly doesn't become stronger with the more damage he takes. Rob was hard to figure out. There's no really other characters in this franchise, unless you count the Professor, but even then, he doesn't really have the same body type. So again, we're returning to Cardboard with the Labo robot. While he's a bit different about his shape, he's the closest robot we have to him, and his car and tank mode somewhat help him get into a similar shape. And finally, unlike Fox and Falco, I believe Wolf stands as his own possibility for his own fighter, given his own different attacks and different properties on already existing attacks. I thought about Pigma, given he's a very important character to the Star Fox lore, but in the end I went with Leon, since he is a much closer design and shape to his boss, along with Panther, who's also being considered since they're both fierce predators, in design anyway. So now, just past the halfway point, let's move on to Smash Bros. For Wii U and 3DS.
Choose your fighter!
Mega Man was pretty obvious. Proto Man. Any Mega Man fan can easily tell you why. Just give him an automatic shield and some slightly new moves, and boom, you're done. Much like Ice Climbers and Gyromite, Wii Fit has very little in their franchise. I did consider Ring Fit Adventurer, but I feel they're more suited towards their own moveset. Fortunately, there are more characters in Wii Fit when compared to the other two, such as this living balance board. I think a little less like Daisy, and a little more like Pichu. On to Rosalina. She could have Lubba, another leader to the Lumas, but you may have to change the Luma color to separate them, and several things may have to be made up for him for this moveset to work. With Lil Mac, there are several boxers that can fight just like him, but Glass Joe is probably the most well-known, closest to his height and weight, and frankly, the funniest choice. It'll be funnier if he happens to be an air fighter. Greninja was easily the hardest Pokemon to make for this list. Surprisingly, ninjas aren't too common in the world of Pokemon. I've seen Sceptile thrown here and there, but in the end I went with Excelgor, a more buggy version of the Quick Ninja. Palutena had one of the easiest choices. I may be biased since I like the character more, but Viridi is my pick. But if you want a more exact copy of Palutena, Medusa is also a great fit as well. Pac-Man? Honestly, take your pick. He mostly derives from his own Namco history rather than the Pac-Man series itself, so pretty much any classic arcade character from Namco's history would work, but I guess Ms. Pac-Man is probably the best choice in this scenario. Robin has a couple options when it comes to a magic character that can also use a sword. Soren is pretty close in terms of their role in the story and being a tactician, but I think Celica fits the role better as a magic caster with a blade than Soren. I just hope you don't mind another character that can damage herself. Morgan can also possibly play the role too, as their own daughter or son. While researching for Shulk's Echo, a couple options came up. I'll be honest, I haven't really played Xenoblade for myself, and I may have spoiled the game for myself, but Elvis with his replica Monado could work just well. Credit to Reddit user Nerdfix Studios for the idea. With Bowser getting Midbus as his Echo Fighter, I think Fawful should join his minion as Bowser Jr.'s Echo Fighter, a faster, trickier, yet a bit more exposed alternative to the Prince of Koopas. Now, Duck Hunt was no doubt the hardest character to come up with out of everyone on the roster. Several people, including myself, struggle to find a character, or trio of characters. A lot of people point to Poochie and Goonie from Yoshi's Island, which is a neat idea. Some even point to Banjo and Kazooie before they were announced. But I think I found a pair I was finally satisfied with Underdog and Yamamura from Super Mario Maker. Credit to HeroScott007 on the Super Smash Bros. Subreddit for the idea. On to Cloud. While I would want more Final Fantasy representation across the whole series, for an Echo Fighter, Zack is easily the best and most obvious choice for Cloud's Echo, the original Buster Sword user. This probably isn't saying much, but Corrin's the hardest Fire Emblem character to give an echo to, mainly because he/she doesn't exactly have many characters that fight like them. There are characters who use dragons, and other characters who use swords, but not quite in a combination like Corrin's. The only exception I could think of is Kana, Corrin's own child, which works. Like many others, Bayonetta had a pretty easy pick with Jean. There wouldn't be too much to change aside from Madama Butterfly being replaced with Madama Styx, and mainly slightly different properties for specials. So that's all the fighters from Wii U and 3DS out of the way. Let's finish this off with Ultimate.
Final battle.
Inkling? Duh. If the first and second game wasn't obvious enough, the Octo expansion pretty much made it almost guaranteed if they possibly came out earlier or something. Meta Ridley also has an obvious pick with Meta Ridley, but since I wanted to avoid alternate skins, I went with one of his clones. There's the adolescent Ridley from Other M, but I don't think we see enough of him, or see how he fights to justify a moveset. So I went with Neo Ridley from Fusion, the ex-parasite that technically counts as his own character. With Returns and Tropical Freeze separating itself from the original Country trilogy, they fortunately came up with their version of not K. Rool, Lord Frederick, complete with ice dragons. Not to toot his own horn or anything. Incineroar has a couple ideas ranging in all kinds of body types and fighting styles. There are other wrestling Pokemon, but I don't think they match Incineroar's body style and form of wrestling super well. So while it may not be the same type, and may not learn all the same moves, but the bulk of Pokemon, Grimmsnarl is my choice. Another Dark-type wrestler, complete with a Dynamax form. Did you know that piranha plants that breathe fire count as their own species? Call me lazy, but I'd say that counts. Perhaps it could reference even more piranha plant species and use more than one fire attack, but if you really want to go for something different, Nibblers from Yoshi's Island are a good candidate too. Joker had a couple of ideas using several other protagonists from the series. Even the other fans of these will use guns and personas, but from a story and game perspective, I chose Akeshi, the other side of the same coin. Hero was tough, mainly because many previous existing characters have already been taken by his ult. Then again, I haven't played a Dragon Quest game, but fortunately I did find something different with the thief Eric. He may not have a shield, but he does have a sword, magic, and chances to crit. Banjo and Kazooie, they don't have many duos like them in their own games, so we'll have to delve out of their franchise, and in that case, it's almost like Yuka and Laylee were made for the role, also borrowing stuff from his Brawl Out cameo as well. Moving on to Terry Bogard, he does have his female ult, Cutie Terry. While I do like the idea of his and hers Terrys, instead I went with what I think a more interesting approach. He's his own kid that Terry trained himself, Brock Howard. By the time I record this, I have yet to beat any of the paths at Fire Emblem Three Houses, and while Byleth isn't the first in either his franchise or in Smash Bros. To use multiple types of weapons, he is the only one to use all four: bows, spears, axes, and swords. Fortunately, while I'd rather see her with her own moveset, Anno, from the Fire Emblem series as a whole, works just as fine. With Min Min, at first I was going to go with Ninjara, since they both have Japanese inspirations, but oddly enough, she shares more similarities with Helix than anyone else, mainly due to the unique combination of Heavy Dragon and Big Heavy Arms, and they share the same stats in the main game. For Steve, I was gonna go with Alex, but no, she had to be an ult for Steve herself. But luckily, I came up with something new with a new gimmick in mind: trading, coming out with the Villager, Pillager, Vindicator, and Pigman ults. There are a lot of villains in Final Fantasy, but none of them quite like Sephiroth, so digging into the spin-offs of Final Fantasy VII, there is Genesis, another, although inferior, experiment with Genova cells, with a large sword and magic. And last but not least, we have the duo of Pyra and Mythra. Huge blows for Xenoblade Chronicles 2, by the way, and curse me for accidentally spoiling the game for myself. Hypothetically, they could have been their own Echo Fighters if you wanted to stretch it, but since they are a team of two, why not combine them into Noma, the complete merged forms of Pyra and Mythra together? So, as this is uploaded in April 2021, that's all the fighters in the game so far. Once the last two fighters are released, I'll update this with the last two fighters in the comments below. Here's a little diagram to show the entire roster. God, this is a mess. While it does make sense why not every fighter gets their own Echo Fighter, I won't deny this is a fun video to make, and frankly, it gives characters like the Labo characters a moveset which I highly doubt they'd get otherwise. From learning about all kinds of franchises that I don't normally play, looking into all different kinds of games and characters that I do play, it's kinda like why I love Smash Bros. So much overall. The many characters and the history behind them. And it opens the questions to new hypotheticals. What if there was more stages, more music, bosses, etc. relating to these fighters? But that's another story.